They never met each other. They live in different cities. They have different jobs, different families, different tax brackets. But if you lined up their bank statements, their spending patterns, their savings rates, their net worth at retirement, you would find something strange. The same mistake, made 4 different times, across 4 different decades of life. One is 24, one is 37, one is 51, one is 63, and none of them know they're doing it. That's the thing about this particular financial error. It doesn't feel like a mistake when you're making it. It feels like progress. It feels like you've finally arrived, like you're doing what adults with money are supposed to do. Economists have a name for it. Behavioral finance researchers have spent decades documenting it. And yet, despite all the data, despite all the warnings buried in academic journals and Federal Reserve reports, this mistake keeps happening. Generation after generation, income bracket after income bracket. It's called lifestyle inflation, and it may be the single most effective wealth killer ever invented. Not by banks, not by markets, not by recessions. By us. By the quiet, almost invisible decision to let our spending grow every time our income does. Here's a number worth sitting with. According to a 2023 survey by Bankrate, 57% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense from savings. That includes people earning $80,000 a year. That includes people earning $120,000. The income went up. The savings didn't. That's not a math problem. That's not a discipline problem. That's a pattern, one that repeats so reliably across American households that researchers at the University of Michigan found spending tends to rise in near perfect lockstep with income, regardless of how much someone earns. More money in, more money out. The gap, the part that becomes wealth, stays almost exactly the same. This is not a video about budgeting. It's not a video about cutting your coffee or canceling your subscriptions. It's a video about 4 real people. Their names changed, their stories composite, but their numbers drawn from documented financial behavior, who each had a version of the same opportunity. A raise, a bonus, a new job, a business that started working, and what happened next. Because here's what makes lifestyle inflation so insidious. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens the way the tide comes in. You don't notice the water rising until you look down and realize you're already waist deep. A slightly nicer apartment because you got a promotion. Reasonable. A leased car to match your new title. Understandable. A vacation that's a little more expensive because, after all, you've been working hard. Deserved. None of these decisions on their own are catastrophic. But together, over a decade, over 2 decades, a study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that the average American who earns $1 million over their working lifetime retires with less than $30,000 in savings. $1 million came in, less than 3 cents of every dollar remained. The question this video asks isn't whether lifestyle inflation is real. The data settled that decades ago. The question is, which version of this mistake are you living right now? Because the answer changes depending on where you are in life. At 24, the cost of this mistake is opportunity. At 37, it's compounding, the interest you never earned. At 51, it's urgency, the narrowing window. And at 63, for some, it's the slow, quiet realization of what could have been. 4 people, 4 decades, 1 mistake, wearing a different face each time. Let's meet them. Meet Jordan, age 24. Jordan just landed his first real job, $52,000 a year, more money than he's ever seen in his life. For 3 years, he was eating ramen in a studio apartment, splitting utilities with two roommates, driving a 2009 Honda with a cracked dashboard. Now he has a salary, a LinkedIn title, and a very compelling reason, or so it feels, to finally live like it. He moves into a one-bedroom downtown, leases a used Mazda, nothing crazy, he tells himself, picks up a gym membership, a streaming bundle, a meal kit subscription, updates his wardrobe because the office has a dress code now. His monthly expenses go from $1,400 to $2,900. His savings rate, nearly zero. Here's what Jordan doesn't know yet, what almost no one tells a 24-year-old with their first real paycheck. A dollar saved and invested at 24 is worth, on average, 7 to 8 times more than a dollar saved at 44, assuming historical market returns. That's not motivation, that's math. That's the compound interest curve. And Jordan is standing right at its steepest point, spending his way past it. Fidelity's retirement research suggests that by 24, a person should ideally have the equivalent of their annual salary saved. The median American at that age has less than $5,000. Jordan isn't behind. Jordan is exactly average. That's the problem. Meet Diane, age 37. Diane is a project manager at a mid-sized tech company. She makes $94,000 a year. She got a raise 3 years ago, then another one last year. She has a 401k. She contributes just enough to get the employer match and calls it responsible. She owns a home, has 2 kids and activities that cost more than she expected. Drives a lease she upgraded when her income went up because, practically speaking, the payment wasn't that different from the old one. She thinks about retirement sometimes. She assumes she'll deal with it seriously in her 40s when the kids are older and things quiet down. Diane is living what researchers call the middle decade trap. It's the period, roughly 35 to 50, where income is rising, but so are obligations, and the psychological pressure to maintain a lifestyle that matches your peer group is at its absolute peak. A report from the Pew Research Center found that Americans in their late 30s report the highest levels of financial stress of any age group, not because they earn the least, but because the gap between what they earn and what they spend is the narrowest. Diane isn't irresponsible. She's doing what her neighborhood, her social circle, and her own internal sense of, I've made it, quietly demands of her. She's also, without knowing it, mortgaging her future to maintain a present that already feels stretched. Meet Robert, age 51. Robert owns a small landscaping business. He's built it over 20 years. There were hard years where payroll was a prayer. And then there were good years. And when the good years came, he spent them. Better trucks. A lake house he rents out sometimes, but mostly uses himself. A boat. A lifestyle that reflects, in his mind, what 20 years of work should look like. He has about $180,000 in retirement savings. At his current lifestyle, he'll need somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 million to retire with the same standard of living. The math, when Robert finally sits down with a financial advisor at 51, is not gentle. To reach $1.2 million by 67, he would need to save and invest approximately $3,800 per month every month for the next 16 years. His current savings rate, $400 a month. A Stanford Center on Longevity study found that Americans between 50 and 60 who realize they are significantly behind on retirement savings almost universally report the same thing in interviews. They didn't think it would add up this fast. The lake house felt like an investment. The trucks were for the business. The boat was the reward for the hard years. Every dollar had a justification. That's the thing about lifestyle inflation at 51. It doesn't feel like excess. It feels like you've finally earned the life you've been building toward. It just comes with a number at the end that doesn't work. Meet Carol, age 63. Carol is 2 years from retirement, or she was until she ran the numbers. She worked for 35 years as a hospital administrator. She raised 2 kids. She sent them to decent schools. She took the family to Europe once, to Hawaii twice. She drove nice cars, not extravagant ones. She lived in a good neighborhood because schools matter and neighborhoods matter, and she worked hard enough to afford it. She has $310,000 saved. Her Social Security estimate is $1,640 a month. She expected to retire at 65. She is now looking at 70, maybe 72. There's a word for what Carol is experiencing, and it's not failure. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances consistently shows that the median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is just under $185,000. Carol is above median, and still short. That's not a story about one person. That's a story about a system, about a culture that normalizes spending at every income level, at every age, in every decade, and then acts surprised when the math doesn't add up at the end. 4 people, 4 decades, Jordan spending the most valuable investing years of his life upgrading a lifestyle that didn't need upgrading. Diane stuck in the middle decade trap, assuming the serious work of wealth building starts later. Robert with a life full of beautiful justifications and a retirement account that doesn't match them. Carol, 2 years out, doing the math she probably should have done at 43. Different faces, different zip codes, different circumstances, one pattern. And here's the question the data keeps asking quietly underneath all 4 of these stories. At what point did each of them know and choose not to look? Here's what all 4 of them have in common, and it's not what you might expect. It's not that they spent too much. It's that they each made a silent agreement at a specific moment in time to let their lifestyle define their ceiling instead of their floor. Jordan upgraded his apartment because he finally could. Diane kept up with a neighborhood that demanded it. Robert built a life that looked like what 20 years of work was supposed to look like. Carol made 1,000 reasonable decisions that, one by one, quietly added up to a retirement that no longer worked. None of them were reckless. None of them were irresponsible in any obvious way. They just never made the other decision. The quieter one. The one that says, my income went up and my life looks exactly the same as it did last year. Not because I can't afford more, but because I've decided that the gap between what I earn and what I spend is the most important asset I own. Wealth researchers call this the savings rate gap. It's not glamorous. It doesn't have a ticker symbol. You can't show it off at dinner. But a Vanguard analysis of investor outcomes over 30-year periods found that savings rate, not investment returns, not stock picks, not timing the market, was the single strongest predictor of retirement wealth. How much you kept, not how much you made. The one shift this video is asking you to consider, just one, is this. The next time your income increases, let your savings rate increase first. Not your lifestyle, not yet. Not until the gap is protected. A raise of $500 a month becomes $300 to savings, $200 to life. Not the other way around. It's not a sacrifice, it's a sequence. Because here's what Jordan still has that Carol doesn't: time. And here's what Carol has that Robert needs: clarity. The number is visible now. The window is narrow, but it's still open. The question is never whether you can afford to save more. The question is whether you can afford to keep not noticing that you haven't. Someone once said that wealth is just the accumulation of everything you decided not to spend. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But simplicity in personal finance is almost always the thing we're running from. Because complexity feels like sophistication, and sophistication feels like we're doing something. Sometimes the most powerful financial decision you will ever make is the one where nothing visibly changes. Your income went up, your lifestyle didn't. And somewhere in that quiet, unremarkable gap, that's where wealth actually lives. If one of these four people felt familiar, if you saw yourself somewhere in Jordan's optimism or Diane's delay or Robert's justifications or Carol's reckoning, drop a comment below with the age that hit closest to home. No judgment, just awareness. And sometimes that's where it starts.